Chapter 2. The oppression begins. Exodus chapter 1, verses 8 to 14. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that, when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies, and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve them with rigor. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, in mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. Exodus chapter 1, verses 8 to 14. We are told that a new king, a new ruler, possibly of a new dynasty, arose who knew not Joseph. There are two possibilities with respect to knowing not Joseph, and the Hebrew word yada allows for both meanings. First, it could refer to a refusal to recognize the importance of Joseph. The Egyptian kings, as gods, did not normally acknowledge any indebtedness to men, least of all foreigners. The ruler chose to ignore Joseph. Second, there could have been an ignorance of Joseph's part in history. Records were kept by most rulers, but many chose not to read them or have them read to them. In Esther chapter 6, verses 1 to 3, we see that Ahasuerus was ignorant of a recent attempt on his life until, on a sleepless night, he ordered the Book of Records or Chronicles of Persia read to him. In any case, whether with or without knowledge, it was not common for a pharaoh to acknowledge a past or present debt to a commoner, especially a foreigner. The word pharaoh meant great house. It referred to the palace area and came in time to apply to the ruler in the palace. Pharaoh declared that Egypt had a problem, overpopulation. This is a recurring myth in history and a political myth. For man, the world is always overpopulated when there are people in it who are disliked. Perhaps at times when Adam and Eve disagreed, each felt that an overpopulation problem existed. Pharaoh's problem was this: there were too many Hebrews and too few Egyptians. The myth usually requires exaggerations. Pharaoh said, The children of Israel are more and mightier than we. He feared thus two things. First, that Egyptians would in time be outnumbered by the Hebrews with serious social consequences. Second, he feared that, in the event of war, the Hebrews would unite with Egypt's enemies. The first fear rested on an exaggeration. The second fear rested on a denial of the historical record. The Hebrews had been in Egypt for many generations. During the course of that time, many wars had been fought by Egypt with no disloyalty on the part of the Hebrews. The problem existed only in Pharaoh's mind, not in the facts of history. There is more, however. In speaking of Pharaoh, we are speaking of a ruling religious hierarchy around him. Since Pharaoh was a god to the Egyptians, he was surrounded by priests who governed his daily life. According to Fraser, every detail of the ruler's life was governed by precise and unwavering rules. His time, both day and night, was prescribed for him. There was a settled rule for every act. While these rules may not have been maintained in all their severity throughout Egypt's history, These requirements indicate the subservience of the ruler to a religious regime. Because the fertility of the land depended on him, the ruler could be blamed for the failure of the rains and the Nile and the crop failures. Egypt's religion was a fertility cult. The high priest of was an embodiment of men, and in certain rituals he would masturbate the young pharaoh and at the same time sodomize him to imbue the young god-king with hyperpotency and to ensure the land's welfare. Joseph had preserved Egypt through a major drought and famine. He had used Pharaoh's power to store up a huge surplus during the productive years in order to care for the people during the drought years. Joseph also reformed the tax structure, reducing the levy to a fifth of the increase of grain crops only. Genesis chapter 47, verses 22 to 26. In ancient Egypt, the fields were sown one year with wheat, the next year with other crops such as barley, spelt, rye, onions, or something else. The third year was for following the land. This meant that orchards and vineyards were not taxed, and only wheat harvests were. The priests depended on Pharaoh's receipts for their support. Thus, those who speak of Joseph as a socialist are very wrong. The people of Egypt said to Joseph, "Thou hast saved our lives." Genesis chapter 47, verse 25. The land had previously belonged to brutal landlords, so that the people were doubly taxed. Because of Joseph's reforms, the land was transferred to the crown, and the people were obligated to pay only a nominal tax. It was a realistic move on Joseph's part. It pleased both the king and the people. Joseph did not tamper with the priestly landholdings, Genesis chapter 47, verse 26, but he did strengthen the royal power against the priests and the landlords. There was no doubt continuing hostility against the Hebrews because of Joseph's reforms. There was another tax in antiquity, one Joseph could not touch, a tax enacted in the form of labour. As a result, when the usual annual labour levy took place, the Hebrews assumed it to be the routine work required. We are told that taskmasters were set over the Israelites to afflict them. The work pace was thus stepped up, and perhaps the number of days of service steadily increased year by year. By such forced labour, Egypt hoped to weaken Israel, that is, to reduce their strength and freedom, and also to lower their birth rate. By making a difference in the work levy of Hebrews and Egyptians, the Egyptians made Israel more conscious of their alien origin. We're told that the birth rate increased instead of dropping. Pharaoh had said, "Let us deal wisely or shrewdly with them." His wisdom was creating troubles for him. The work assigned to the Hebrews was the construction of 2 cities, made of brick. It included all manner of service in the field, verse 14, which usually meant digging or clearing canals and like tasks. Pharaoh's unjust levies made Israel aware of its past and its heritage. Both Joshua chapter 24 verse 14 and Ezekiel chapter 20 verse 8 tell us that Israel had become Egyptian in its faith and outlook to a fearful degree. Pharaoh was now reminding them that they were not Egyptians. According to Jewish records, which may be true, the Hebrews filled the theatres and all the places of amusement. They had become Egyptians. Oppression would in time make them Israelites again. In the ancient world, no other people was more self-consciously separate from others than the Egyptians. This limited their influence and created problems, as racism does in any people. Egypt was also an area of amazing fertility, but has often been one of the poorest areas of the world because of misrule. The forced labour, or corvée, has a long history, much of it ugly. However, in France, at the time of the French Revolution, many rural areas resisted the revolutionary regime because it had become accustomed to meet from time to time in church to decide on needed road or bridge work and to allocate the labour. The designation of tasks had become a form of self-government. In Egypt, however, forced labour could be murderous. Herodotus tells us that Necho began the construction of a canal which cost the lives of 120,000 Egyptians. Modern scholars tend to question this number, but they underrate the horrors of tyrannies past and present. In Under the Willows, James Russell Lowell spoke of us all as we who by shipwreck only find the shores of divine wisdom, an insight true of us today and of Israel of old. It must be added that those who will not be awakened by shipwreck will only perish. God led Israel out of Egypt and sentenced them to death in the wilderness. It was the next generation that gained the promised land.